Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar Zooming in on European e-commerce. I'm joined by a whole lot of people today, which is a bit uncommon for me. Hopefully I can manage everybody. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. Thank you for joining. This is to launch our European report. I'm looking at the wrong camera. This is to launch our European report that we just published today. You can get it on the e-commerce wiki or also our website. Which was sponsored mostly by Ecommerce Europe and Eurocommerce. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves really quickly. With me is Luca Cassetti and Alessandro Schiamarelli. My Italian is terrible. We also have Joanna Pina Pereira, hopefully I said that right, from Wharton, Portugal. And we have Wouter de Vries from Your Surprise, de Vries. Oh God, I'm terrible with other languages. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, starting with Luca, and then you can know them. And if you have some questions, you can already put them in the questions section. But Luca, say no.
Thank you very much, Sarah. My name is Luca Cassetti. I'm the Director of European Public Affairs of Ecommerce Europe. Ecommerce Europe is the European E-commerce Association. We are based in Belgium. We mainly do public affairs in London.
Thank you, Luca. Hi, everyone. I'm Alessandro Schiamarelli. I'm an economist, and I work for Eurocommerce, which is the European Association of Retail and Wholesale, and we represent the interest of retail and wholesale in Europe.
Cool. Joanna, do you want to start next?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Joanna. I work for Wharton, the leading Portuguese retailer for consumer electronics, and we've just launched a marketplace, and we're on a word of ramping up our e-commerce. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Wouter?
Hi everybody, my name is Wouter. I'm the founder of Your Surprise. Your Surprise is an e-commerce website where you can order all kinds of personalized gifts. We are an SME company based in the Netherlands, and we have native websites in 16 countries at the moment, so we are quite active throughout the whole of Europe.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you for coming and joining us. So our main purpose here is to hear from Ecommerce Europe and Eurocommerce about their perspectives of the European report, what we learned from it about Europe and European e-commerce, particularly in light of the elections that we just had. But also we're joined by two great, I'm going to call you guys retailers, to really help us understand as well their perspectives on the European market. So, but before we start with the questions, I'm gonna hopefully do this correctly. Wouter and Joanna, I'm just gonna mute you guys because I'm gonna do a bit of a presentation on the European report, actually. And I'm a bit slow, sorry. Let's get this going. Bear with me, everybody. I'm not always great at this. I don't know how I can show my screen. Well, in the meantime, if you guys have some questions, I should have told you already that you can put them inside the questions box. And then maybe we can get to that in a moment. I don't know how to change my thing around. Actually, okay, so we'll switch it up a bit. I'm going to start off with Luca giving us some perspective on the European report while I figure out how to let you guys see my screen. I don't know how to do that apparently. So we're going to get the e-commerce Europe perspective on the European report, and then after that Eurocommerce. Look it up for it.
I'm not going to spoil your report.
Yeah, yeah, don't.
I just have a couple of figures. What we mainly do at Ecommerce Europe is public affairs, as I said. So first of all, I would like to thank Ecommerce Operations for having prepared this report. Ecommerce Europe is the voice of the digital commerce sector in Europe, and through our 19 national e-commerce associations, we represent more than 75,000 companies selling goods and services online to consumers. The mission of Ecommerce Europe is to act at European level to help policymakers create, let's say, a better framework for online merchants so that their sales can grow further. With a European B2C e-commerce turnover that is forecasted to grow at around 13% and to hit approximately 621 million euros in 2019, Ecommerce Europe is, of course, very pleased to see that the e-commerce sector, the European e-commerce sector, is still growing at a fast pace. So this is indeed a great signal that we see from the report for our industry, and we're really happy with this. However, despite the, let's say, the good progress stemming from the very good cooperation between policymakers and the industry to build a harmonized, we call it digital single market, European online merchants still face many barriers to growth, especially when they try to go cross-border. And one of the biggest challenges for them is still the lack of level playing field, not only at European level, at European Union level, but also globally. Because players based outside Europe can basically put major pressure on the European market. In this regard, we really think that businesses need all the support they can get from policymakers in order to be able to grow in a world that is becoming increasingly competitive and global, of course. And we also think that the e-commerce sector is at the turning point. So if the European Union really wants its companies to fully play the role in an increasingly globalized and competitive world, then the European Union needs to create a truly harmonized market and a favorable environment where European e-commerce businesses can flourish. The recent European elections represent, of course, the best occasion for European policymakers to seize the opportunity of the new upcoming mandate, 5 years in the European institutions, and build a strong political vision for our sector. And in our opinion, to unlock the growth potential of our industry and build on the strong basis of the report that we're going to present,
Eventually.
I hope eventually soon. So there are some 3-4 key policy objectives to fulfill in the coming years. First of all, we think that it is crucial to make sure that we are able to enforce current regulations before creating new rules, because maybe the problem we have is not about lack of regulations, but maybe lack of good enforcement of the rules that are already existing. Secondly, we also think that it is very important to harmonize essential laws so that European businesses can rely on single sets of rules when they try to go cross-border. I'm talking, for example, about contract law or consumer law that are now only minimally harmonized in the European Union. So it means that potentially you end up with dealing with 28 different sets of rules for this kind of issues related to consumer and contract law. We also think that it is essential that rules created at European level are enforceable also vis-à-vis non-European companies that are operating in the European Union. And finally, we need more investments in new technologies, in digital education, so that e-commerce businesses are empowered to shape Europe's digital future. And in our opinion, only this way we can succeed in creating a harmonized and competitive digital single market where e-commerce will continue its double-digit growth and where businesses will be able to compete on a global scale. Without forgetting the fact that online and offline, so the two worlds are merging, so we are talking about omni-channel now, so it doesn't make any sense to create frameworks that are different for the two worlds.
Yeah.
That's basically.
Oh, that was easy. Okay.
That was easy.
I hope that you can see us. Yeah. Can you see us and the little report background? Cool. Okay. You want me to present and then you can go, or you wanna give your input?
No, I can give my input already.
Yeah,
I just would like to, let's say, anticipate just one figure which you're going to present more in detail, but let's say it helps me introduce the points that I would like to make very briefly.
Teaser for the.
It's a teaser for the exactly the wider presentation of the report, exactly. Well, let's just say a few points. On behalf of Eurocommerce, Eurocommerce, as I said, is the European Association representing retail and wholesale in Europe. We actually represent a vital sector for the economy. On aggregate, retail turnover, the value of retail sales in 2018 was 2.7 trillion euros. And it employs currently around 29 million people, which makes of a retail and wholesale, also the wholesale sector, the largest private employer in Europe. We represent overall retail and wholesale 10% of the whole value added at the European level. And we also our sector is largely made up by SMEs, which are the backbone of the sector, is backbone of the economy. So retail really plays a vital role for the economy. It serves consumers, it serves communities and towns and city centers. It's really an essential sector. And out of this, we really believe that this report is really helpful to understand and put e-commerce into context and how e-commerce can interact with the traditional offline retailing. And it's very interesting because if we look at the amount of at the European level, EU28, e-commerce represent only 6% now of total retail turnover, but it's increasing very, very rapidly. And this poses a great challenge, but also great opportunity for the future of retail in Europe. If we look at the performance, this is what I will the teaser for you to explain more in detail. If we look at the annual growth rate of e-commerce sales in the aggregate Europe, the growth rate was 12% in 2018 and is expected to reach 13.6% in 2019, which is impressive. If you compare it to the growth rate of overall retail turnover, which was just 1% in 2018, and on average was around 1% over the last 5 years, then it's really impressive. Shows you how dynamic e-commerce is in Europe. And there, the challenge is that e-commerce really is based on the fact that consumers are increasingly willing to find everything they want, whenever they want, so the consumer pattern is changing, and retail must be able to respond to these challenges, to these changes in the consumer demand. And the point is, what I would like to say really, the point I want to make is that this increasing growth of e-commerce, this increasing digitalization is not really a matter of, let's say, brick and mortar, traditional brick and mortar versus e-commerce, or the two things competing. I believe that the two things rather complement each other. And this really poses a challenge for traditional retailers to be able to combine offline and online and shift to what you say omni-channel, so that e-commerce is really able to trigger substantial innovation in retail, which is something which we need to compete at a global level to be able to meet these challenges. As I said, retail is experiencing a major change in the overall business pattern. And the point is really to become able to compete at a global level with Chinese and US giants, which are making big profits and are, let's say, increasing their market shares at the world level. And in this respect, on the policy side, what we call really is something which can tackle a major problem, which is a fragmentation of the retail market, which is an issue. The fragmentation of the retail market is fragmentation of a single market as a whole, which is a problem in Europe nowadays. If you look at the top 5 retailers in European retail, you won't find the same retailer in 2 different countries, and no European retailer has more than 5% market share at the European level. So it tells you how fragmented the market is, and we call for policy action to cope with this issue. And in addition to barriers that are stemming from different legislation in different member states, and in addition to, as I said earlier, the fast changing and increasingly challenging retail environment, which really poses a challenge. But really, overcoming single market fragmentation is a priority, and also we call, in this respect, for, as Luca said, for a digital playing field, let's say, and we call for the single market to work so as to really unleash the potential, which is represented by over 500 million consumers in Europe, and so as to allow European retail sector to compete at the global level.
Great, that was great. Yeah, and I also think what you said about the consumer the consumer panel, or the consumer behavior changing, is very true, because as we see more millennials getting older, and we see more and more that there's also a shift in the generations that are shopping online and are wanting more of that omni-channel approach as well. So it's also kind of cool to have you both here, because there's this marriage, this nice little combination we have here of the retail, of course, brick and mortar, but also the e-commerce part, which is really also what omni-channel is about. Which is why it's cool that we have Wouter and Joanna here with us, which they will speak shortly, because Joanna, she mentioned that they started the marketplace, and that'll be interesting to hear what she has to say about that, because they also have physical stores. And then Wouter, it would be nice to hear what he has to say about your surprise with the online stores. So, but okay, so for the main event, no, I don't want to call the report that. That's a bit extreme. But I'm going to go over the report with everybody, and I'm not good with technology, but I'm going to try. So, my name is Sarah. I'm from the Ecommerce Foundation, Ecommerce Operations, which we're formerly known as. The report was put together by my team and I. I could not have done it without Ludovica and Isabella. And we had some really great sponsors this year. Of course, I already mentioned Ecommerce and Ecommerce Europe. Thank you. There are big uns. But we also had SAP, Ascendia, MultiSafePay, Dotshop, and Manhattan Associates. So it's pretty clear this is a really important report for everybody around Europe. Okay, so without further ado, let's see if I can do this correctly. These are the countries that we included in the report. They're highlighted in orange. There's quite a few. We also included Russia and Turkey. So when we looked at Europe, we wanted to look at the continent. We really wanted to look at what's happening with countries that are actually bordering each other and how are they working together. So if one of these countries is of interest to you, you should definitely check out the report. It's number 3 in the report, sorry. Okay, so really briefly, obviously, internet penetration is consistently the highest in Northern Europe and the Scandinavian countries. I think that's no surprise to anybody. We can see that that's over time. That is increasing everywhere, though, as internet penetration is set to reach this year about 82.5%. Oh, it's a long day. So next up, I hope you guys can see this one. It's a bit fuzzy, I think, because it's in my PDF document. Iceland has the highest internet penetration. Again, you can see the Scandinavian countries. This is really helpful if you are interested in knowing about a specific country. You can kind of understand, okay, are people actually accessing the internet there? So you can see once you get down a bit further, maybe not so much, or maybe they do have internet access, but it's a bit limited, let's say. So this is some more information. When it comes to online shopping, it's pretty clear that people from Switzerland love to shop online. I have 2 Italians here with me, so I think they know full well that the Swiss love to shop cross-border actually as well, from the German Amazon store, from the Italian Amazon store, from the French Amazon store. So they're very tech savvy. But then also the UK and Denmark and the Netherlands, where we're based out of at e-commerce operations. So we see that Western Europe is really leading the way when it comes to online shopping. These consumers are quite used to shopping online. This is I call this the money slide because it does have money on it, but also because this is the thing that everybody wants to know, which is what is the turnover looking like in Europe. And as you can see, we forecasted that it would hit about 621 billion euros this year, coming up soon. The growth rate is still increasing. It's still at a really stable rate, actually, so I don't foresee it decreasing. And I think that's due in large part to what you both talked about, which is that omnichannel is growing. So what is e-commerce now? If you order something on your phone, but you pick it up in a store, is that e-commerce? What kind of e-commerce is that? These are some interesting things, but I think as they become closer linked together, we'll see more and more this number increasing and growing. But it's a huge market. I think this is the same size as actually the US market, or maybe China, actually, I think was 6 or 2 billion last year. So all of Europe, that's pretty substantial. Okay, let's see, can I click next? Yes. As we talked about, and Alessandro mentioned it, the growth rate is 13.6%. It was definitely higher in 2014 and 2015. I think that was when it was boom, all of a sudden everybody wanted to shop online. Also, we had, maybe our economies were doing a bit better, perhaps. But then we had a bit of a decrease, but that's okay because this is the growth rate. So this is the rate at which it's growing is still properly a good number there. As you can see here, most of the e-commerce turnover is concentrated in Western Europe. I thought this was really important to show everybody because Eastern Europe has still got a long way to go before they reach up there. But a lot of it has to do with actually currency conversion. So we are seeing more and more often that Eastern Europeans are happy to shop online, they're ready to shop online, but with the currency conversion to euros, it just makes it look like they're not spending as much. But really they're very happy to shop online. But that does make it look like Western Europe takes the big chunk of the pie with 66%. But when it comes to the average spending per e-shopper in Europe, in 2019, I'm thinking it's going to be quite high, actually, around almost 1,500 euros per person, which sounds like a lot, but actually it is a lot. However, when you think about what people are buying online, and I think if you ever check out a country report of ours, you will see that we break it up a lot of times into categories. It's really difficult to do that across Europe, to break it up into the product categories that people are buying. People are really happy to buy small electronics and fashion online, and those are smaller purchases. So it's really easy for them to buy something from H&M online, and then maybe take it back to the store and return it, let's just say. So it's still, people are not buying 12 TVs in a year online, so that number is not 10,000 yet. Maybe it will be at some point, but they are buying the smaller items. Okay, I wanted to also, it's a bit blurry, I'm sorry. That's why you should definitely buy the report. That was a shameless plug, I'm sorry. So just to give you a bit of what this slide is, we've got online purchases from sellers from other EU countries, and we've got online purchases from sellers from the rest of the world, so non-EU countries. So what's interesting about this one is to see who is really happy to buy from other European countries and who is actually really happy to buy from the rest of the world. And you can see that Maltese are more likely to buy from other EU sellers. And that's really because it's, of course, right, it's an island. They are a bit like Iceland as well. They also, I think, are feeling they want to definitely buy from other EU countries. But we have some other good countries on here that are, yeah, the UK is an interesting one because they do definitely shop quite domestic. But yeah, so you can check this slide out as well. Cyprus is also another really interesting one. They love buying from other EU countries. Also Luxembourg. So when you look at really small countries that have domestically quite a small, it's quite easy to sell into that country actually. And yeah, and of course a lot of these smaller countries also speak English and yeah, fairly well. Okay, but so now we have 2017. It's going to be really interesting to hear what Joanna has to say about this one. I have a question for her about that. It looks to me like Portuguese e-shoppers are most concerned about payment security. And this was in 2017, but when we thought about what are the barriers for people shopping online, the reasons why they don't want to shop online, for every country that's a bit different, right? And you can see with Portugal that it's quite high for the payment security concerns, but also in Turkey as well. And so it's interesting to understand in relation to the policy you guys talked about as well, it's interesting to see why that is, what is happening in the policy maybe that changes that, or what is it that retailers can do to make people feel more comfortable with actually shopping online and their payment processes. Again, that was from 2017, so it will be interesting to hear what Joanna has to say about that one now. Okay, the next one up, I'll be a bit quicker probably. The reasons for not ordering online, there are a lot of people who like to shop still in the store. They like to feel the product, touch it, they like to take it home with them immediately, they like to talk to the shop owner still. And we see that in some more of the Eastern European countries. I think there's still a bit of hesitance with will I get my product? How do I know that I will get my product? When will I get my product? Can I trust this web shop? You see more of the concerns about trust, and maybe you will want to talk about actually the trust mark at some point and say how you can increase trust in a way to really, yeah, to inspire more Europeans to shop online at your web shop and not worry so much about trust. Okay, I'm going to go over quickly the regions and then I'm going to move on because I think our retailers are much more interesting than me. With Northern Europe, we can see that I wanted to break it down for you. I know I did a little bit ago, but I wanted to show you the growth rates as well. I want to also add, though, before we do this, and I think the Norwegian E-commerce Association will love me for saying this, hopefully, that it's really difficult to measure e-commerce. We do our best, and we do a great job with the E-commerce Association, so praise be to them, because I don't think that we could do it without them. But it is really hard because some people include goods in there, goods and services, or just services, and it's never really super clear always how we are measuring it. Is it with a consumer panel? Is it with a payment service provider? So you should always keep in mind that with these are all our best estimates, and we do a really good job together to come up with solid numbers for you, but it's never really pinpoint accuracy, unfortunately. So it's tough to really compare the countries in a full way, but we do our best to try to make that more understandable. So Northern Europe is doing pretty well, as you can see. We've got actually average spending per e-shopper is over 2,000 euros. That's also because the currency conversion, some of the Norwegian currency and Scandinavian currency in general is worth more. But they're doing pretty well, actually, for countries that don't have massive populations. They're doing really well with their turnover. Central Europe is just behind a little bit with 38 billion euros coming up in 2019. But they do have 66% of people shopping online, so that's really nice to see, and I think that's also growing as well. Speed it up. Eastern Europe, we have here, you can see they're, like I said earlier, a bit more behind with 26 billion. But again, that growth rate of 16% is massive. So I really think it's going to continue increasing. And I think they're more likely to shop from other EU web shops as well. And the eShopper penetration is also pretty good with 52%. Next up, we have Southern Europe. Southern Europe is doing pretty well. Italy and Spain are very happy to shop online. Definitely the Spanish are very happy. Zara, they shop online quite regularly. So yeah, I think Southern Europe is also doing really well, which in previous years, it looked to be a bit more stagnant, but it's with the growth rate of 20%, it's doing quite well. And then Western Europe, of course, takes the cake for everything, it seems. We're projecting that it's going to be about 408 billion this year coming up. Let's hope it's even more, because that would be really nice. And they also have, I think, quite a few people shopping online, obviously, with 81%. So if you're looking for a region to expand into or an actual country, the report actually includes every single country in it that we cover with their own specific B2C turnover and a lot more stats. So how many people are accessing the internet, who's shopping online, etc. So you can check out a specific country in the report if you'd like, but this also gives you a good idea for regionally how that's working out and if you want to expand to a region. And my last slide, I wanted to show you the marketplaces that are leading in Europe. I only looked at the top 3 because I think you can really access these are available to most people in European countries. You have some smaller ones, yeah, but I wanted to show you for the Amazon, eBay, and AliExpress who's really leading here. And I found it really interesting to see that Amazon is really dominating in Western Europe, whereas in Eastern Europe, it's definitely AliExpress, and then eBay and in a lot of Scandinavian countries, and also some Eastern European countries. We have a whole case study in the reports about marketplaces, so if you would like to read the case study, you can learn more about all of the marketplaces that we covered. And I think it's pretty interesting to hear what they each have to say. And you can also take a survey. There's a link to a survey there. If you're a retailer who has sold online on a marketplace or hasn't and has decided not to, you can take the survey and let us know. It would be cool to see where you guys are with that. Okay, I'm done. I will end that. Let's see. I think now I can turn on somebody else, not just me. Let's see. Wouter, I'm going to unmute you and send you a webcam request. And also Joanna. Oh, okay. I think we can hear you.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you guys see me? It's okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, I think we can also see Joanna. Okay, nice to see you guys again. All right, so we're going to go back and, sorry, you guys are just sitting here. I will try to ask you a question as well, and we'll keep it short. So my first question, actually, I wanted to bring it back to the page that I had about Portugal. I don't know if maybe Joanna, hopefully that was not too fast and random for you. You were able to see that. It looks like Portuguese consumers have a bit of a concern with payment security, and the stat that I looked at was from 2017. So I was curious to know, as a retailer in Portugal, how do you feel about Portuguese consumers? Do they really feel that there are some concerns with payment security? Do you think that's changing, or what are your general thoughts on that?
I mean, we have a very particular landscape of payment methods in Portugal. So we have here really the most common paying method is something quite actually very similar to the ATM, home banking. We call it the ATM reference or whatever. So there's really not much advantage in using a credit card online. In terms of, I mean, if you look at the statistics of personal credit or whatever in Portugal, it's quite in line with that as well. Actually, we've been rolling out as probably everybody else the 3D Secure for credit card payments as well, and so we were actually hoping to get some more well, kind of a shift towards that method, but we're actually not observing that. So I really think it has to do with a very particular paying methods landscape. So I definitely believe it's a trust issue because we see this as well, but it's not really affecting e-commerce because we do have as the main payment method just the ATM kind of based payment I've just told you about.
Yeah, and it's it's funny because living in the Netherlands, I don't really ever hear people. Someone's getting a call. I don't know who. Anyway, I don't ever usually hear people in the Netherlands talking about, they didn't get answered. I don't typically hear people, yeah, I don't hear people talking about security issues as much in the Netherlands, and it would be interesting to hear what Wouter has to say, because I also live in the Netherlands, and we have a payment method that we use called Ideal, and that one's really, when we did the Dutch report recently, that really, I think it was like 89% or something that reached that consumers like to use Ideal. So when it comes to, I think you, Wouter, Your Surprise sells in 16 countries, I think I saw, is operational in 16 countries. It would be interesting to also hear your thoughts on payment security and trust issues. Have you noticed a difference in different countries that you sell in, and who has a trust issue more so than another, or who is more hesitant to use a certain type of payment methodology because of trust issues or payment security concerns?
Yeah, in the Netherlands, you said it's very good. It is, I think. And throughout the rest of Europe, I think it's evolving with the rise of the e-commerce, and payments is just a matter of the total perception you have on the level of professionalism and the level of acceptance for buying online. When we started in 2005, you didn't have Ideal, and then we had sort of the same issues, like people were reluctant to buy online. And you just see this is all changing. It has to do with logistics, with payment, with just general trust in e-commerce, I think. I think it's not really related to the payment methods or how this is being dealt. It's just about the idea that you pay for something what you cannot see yet, and the trust that you get it at your house. So I think that's more the thing we are talking about instead of the specific trust in payment, yes or no.
Okay. Yeah, so do you notice a difference in any of the countries that you sell into regarding who struggles with trust more, or is that something that's really hard to measure, would you say?
No. Of course, you see a big difference. In the Netherlands, we are quite far, I think, indeed, because we also have a really fast delivery. So this helps you gaining trust. You buy something tonight, and if you don't have it tomorrow, there's a problem. So it's a really short feedback loop between consumers and companies. And if you look in France, for example, the logistics are a little bit harder. So this means people are more reluctant to, or not more reluctant, but they have more questions, like you see it. Yeah. We just started in Poland last year, and there's there's also a trend like this. It's just people have more questions. You see more calls coming in at your customer service, and they are not related to functional questions, but they are related to just checking if I buy it today, do I really have it in the 4 or 5 days that you promise? So they just checking, is there a real company behind this website?
Yeah. Okay, so quite a bit of uncertainty in some countries. Maybe it's more of this checking up. Hello, am I going to get it? Are you real? Are you? Yeah. Do you? Okay, so let me just ask Joanna really quickly. Do you also? Do you see in Portugal, and I know you guys also sell in Spain that's correct, yeah? Do you also see a difference in the level of trust that people have or in the uncertainty that they feel? Do you also have people calling and saying, am I surely going to get it in 4 days? Or how do you think consumers are for you?
I mean, in terms of, because we are such a well-recognized brand in Portugal and Spain, we don't really get as much of, well, the trust issue, I suppose, because, I mean, in Portugal, we're the leading retailer. We have over 180 stores. We're the biggest online e-commerce operation. So there's not really a trust issue in the brand itself. Of course, there are a lot of issues concerning logistics and the operational fulfillment of the order. And I do completely recognize what Wouter is just pointing out, that it's unbelievably more and more complex to provide a good service because people have increasingly higher expectations. So all of a sudden, next day delivery is definitely a standard, which, as you can imagine, for even in such a small country as Portugal, really poses a lot of challenges. And won't even go into Spain, which is much more competitive market than in Portugal, and our market share is also a bit different there. And we are definitely going for or aiming at the best delivery service, just actually meeting customers' expectations. But they're definitely getting higher and higher, so it's hard to keep up. We're doing our best, and I think we're actually succeeding to some extent in both countries to just do that. So
Yeah, but it's funny because what you said about the brand recognition, so you don't struggle with that. And it's, as you said, because you guys have been around for so long. I think I read 2001 that you opened up your online store, right? Is that correct? 2001, I think.
most probably, I actually wasn't
Yeah.
there, so can't confirm
Yeah,
the exact date.
Yeah,
But
but as you said, it's been so long. The brand really is solid in those countries. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just hearing to your introduction. Our positioning is really as an omni-channel retailer. So we do have the advantage of having real people in real stores or physical stores. And we actually see that a lot. Even when people buy online, they do have the comfort of going into a specific store and asking for advice or asking for a specific question on their order, or just complaining as well also happens. So I think this is definitely something that really aids to the trust issue. And we've been around for quite some time. And in Spain, not as long as in Portugal, for sure. And of course, our market positioning is different. But we also feel that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have this omni-channel positioning. We're actually, as a company, we've actually kind of moved onto a digital first company. So we have this motto, which is basically we're a digital company with a human touch and physical stores, which is quite a change for such a for what was originally a bricks and mortar company. And this really goes to show that it's not really about being online only. It's about being digital first in stores and online. And I think this really is, up until now, we feel it's really a winning proposition.
Yeah, but so then it leads me to a question for Wouter actually as well, because from what I understand, now please do correct me, I think you guys are online only, right? At your surprise, or do you also have physical stores?
So we are online only.
Okay, so this is actually quite an interesting dichotomy that we have between the two of you. We have one person, Joanna, that does both omni-channel, and then we have Wouter who's doing only online. What do you see as some of the struggles? And I know that I read I think I read about your company, about your surprise, that you have a native speaker in all of the countries that you have native speakers, which I'm sure bridges a gap between the consumers and your surprise. And maybe that would be some piece of advice that you might give to smaller SMEs who are trying to start up or expand. But yeah, I'm curious to know what some of the struggles that you've seen have been with not having omni-channel, or maybe some of the benefits that you've seen of being online only.
Of course, the clearest benefit that it's quite easy to scale up in another country. We launch a website and we see how conversion is going in this when we attract consumers, and on these first data we will decide whether we invest more in the country or not. So it's really a pragmatic way of internationalizing, which of course is a lot harder if you have to open physical stores. Yeah. I think the downside is, of course, and that's what we try to sort of undercut with native people. We have is that we have less connection with the actual country and with the habits of this country and the perception of these people. So yeah, it's a lot more cost effective and a lot more agile model, just being online. The downside is that you have less real feeling with this country and with what people are doing there.
Yeah, and you must really have to stock your customer service call lines as well for, as Joanna said, when people just want to call and complain, I imagine.
Yeah, it's not complaining, it's just you have to be, we as a company believe in being present for customers the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just have to provide them with all the means possible to be able to reach you if they have if there is an issue or if they have a question while ordering. It's but we are used to this, so that's not really a problem. We just do whatever needs to be done to make sure we we get the confidence of the visitor and the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. Do you?
Can I
Please
just
go
make
for it. Jump on in.
I mean, a couple of little points on consumer trust.
Go for it.
Because consumer trust, of course, is crucial for for e-commerce even more, and especially for pure players. And there are tools that are specifically helping SMEs, but not only, also bigger players. I don't know if it is visible, but Ecommerce Europe launched.
Yeah, there you go.
It's very tiny. It's a pan-European label. It's a trust mark. It's a trust mark.
Yeah, we have it.
You have it.
Oh, yeah,
You
cool.
see? So this is something that is supposed to, let's say, provide consumers trust that they need to buy online. Because if you're carrying this trust mark, it means that you're complying with minimum European legislation. So you know that the webshop is processing data according to European law and so on and so on. So there is a code of conduct and there is a certification process that is done by our national association. So long story short, there is a direct link between trust marks and increase of conversion and increase of consumer trust.
Yeah.
So it's beneficial for both the SMEs, the web shops in general, and the consumers. But what we see more and more now is that you have to add something extra to your trust mark. You have to add consumer reviews.
Yeah.
Because a trust mark now, we see that it is not enough anymore. Depending on the countries, I don't know exactly which ones, but we know that in some areas of Europe, people need to see other consumer reviews before buying.
Yeah.
So a trust mark is not enough anymore. So if you have a trust mark, we're also working on it. We have to also include these consumer reviews. And some of our national associations in Ecommerce Europe are already working on that. Some already implemented it. But that's what you need. You need to give the trust the consumer needs to buy online. And the trust mark is one of the tools that you can use.
Yeah, and I think that's increasing more, as Alessandro said, when about the consumers themselves changing more and more. I think millennials as well. Maybe you guys have seen it too as retailers. We are expecting a lot more. We're expecting the consumer reviews for free returns. We want, as Joanna said as well, it's super hard to meet with what consumers want, which is I want my delivery. It's sometimes in the Netherlands the same day, which as an American originally, that's quite astonishing actually. But it is a small country to be fair. But still, same day delivery. We want free returns. We want everything. It's really interesting to see the change. And this is also an interesting point. So Joanna, for you have a lot of brand recognition in both countries that you're in. So SMEs probably might think, yeah, okay, I don't have that though. How do I expand into another country and really actually get people to buy from my shop? Because I imagine for them as an SME, it's quite difficult. So as you said, the trust mark, I think, is a good way to help. And Wouter, maybe as you said, the native speakers of the language and trying to at least build a connection might help them as well with the trust. But then for Joanna, do you foresee in the future, expanding into other countries? And how do you think you would do that without the same brand recognition if you would decide to?
Well, we did move into Spain, and back then the brand recognition was non-existent, as you can imagine. So it's been a path, but just as Wouter was pointing out, this is an omni-channel operation is something that really takes a long time to roll out, and we're increasingly more online first as well, and also in Spain. So we really focus specifically there as well in our online operation. But I mean, I think this is a model that has to find different ways of expansion, and I don't really see that in the model we have in Portugal and Spain. These are very specific realities we have now. So, as all retailers, we're a company first, not, and we have specific models adjusted to specific competitive landscapes and markets. So, will be something different for sure.
Yeah. Do you think, Wouter, do you think that it depends on the product that you actually sell for whether or not you should be more online or primarily online or also omni-channel? Do you think it depends on the product, or do you think it's just, yeah, how do you feel about that, I guess?
I think it can be a good way to be online and offline. I don't really think it's depending on the product. You see people buying cars online, like so I think it's more about the brand. Like, do you want to be a brand which is also visible to consumers in an offline world, or is that necessary for your brand, or isn't that necessary for your brand? Like, I think we had many products where we said, like, okay, you cannot sell this online. You see it being sold online now. Like travel industry, for example, they don't need something physical anymore. But from a brand perspective, they can still choose to have physical appearance. But for just selling the product, it's maybe not necessary. So I think many brands are choosing this model for, like Coolblue in the Netherlands. They don't need stores for selling their products. I think it's more of a brand reasoning behind it, why they open stores. And of course, they do a lot of conversions there, but I don't think it's really product dependent.
Yeah,
actually,
go ahead, please.
Just to speak to that, I actually think, I mean, we love Coolblue as an example. So actually, that's really interesting because they came from the exact opposite position we were in. So from a pure player to then offline stores, and again, I think this really works as a hybrid, and sometimes it's for brand for sure, but also a bit product driven, because some products you just really need to experience them, even if you don't buy offline. And I mean, how can you see the quality of a TV screen, the different technology they have now, without going to the stores? I mean, technology is evolving, of course, but you have to have seen it somewhere if you're willing to pay the premium for the last generation of TV screens or whatever. So this is just an example. But I do agree with you that mostly, well, we do see that at Wharton as well. Many people come to look at our products and then they convert, well, at Wharton or somewhere else. But I do think there's something still of a product in there in terms of need to go offline, but it's increasingly less. And you wouldn't imagine selling cars online some years ago, and still it's a growing industry. But because people do trust the brand, and most of all, they've seen it offline somewhere else. So I think it's kind of a mix, and some of it is definitely product led as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also maybe consumers where you are specifically. Some consumers may be more likely wanting to test out a product. But the question of the I don't know, the decade then is, how do you think new technologies, so I don't know, VR or these types of things are going to impact people's shopping online? Do you think it will increase or decrease, or do you think people will still say, no, I want to shop in the store? Maybe Wouter, you can go first, and then Joanna. The question is, how do you see new technologies shaping e-commerce, particularly from your perspectives?
I would say any technology that leads to more convenience and time saving for a consumer is helping moving everything towards online, because it just saves you time. So all these technologies, if they help you to make a decision online, which will speed up the process of choosing, of comparing, of feeling and touching or whatever, it will move towards the most convenient way, which is mostly online. On the other hand, people want to go out. They don't want to be behind the computer screen the whole day. So if you offer a sort of experience where they can walk into a store and have a really nice experience, which is actually really a decision to spend your time on this and not on something else, then of course it's a great way to do something with retail. So yeah, in my opinion, technology will mostly lead to making it more easy to buy something online. On the other hand, technology can also be used to enhance the experience in the retail environment. So yeah, to me, technology is always sort of it's a constant factor in our world. So it's more about the vision you have on your brand and how to reach consumers. I think that should be make the choice whether you want to be online or offline or both. Instead of technology or because this will always change. Like it's a strategic decision to be in the physical world with your brand. You don't do this for 2 years, you don't do this for 3 years. You believe in the idea that it's important for people to see your brand and what you want to tell them in an offline environment. So I don't think this should be technology-driven decisions. So whatever will come, it will save time and it will make it more easy for people to buy stuff online.
Yeah. Joanna?
Definitely agree with Wouter, which basically technology is both valid for online as well as offline experiences. And I mean, if you go nowadays into a Vorten store, really a very significant percentage of the purchases that are done at a store are dematerialized in the sense that we do not have the stock in store, and still people buy from there using, well, technology that enables them to choose the right product and then to just with the aid of a shop assistant or not, just to purchase something that is physically not there. So why should they go there instead of just buying online? And this is just, it really has to do with human nature. You know, technology is fleeting, but human nature is just it's just a constant, isn't it? And so we really need this human touch to some extent. I think technology, both online and offline, will just be an enabler of better human choices. Online, we see, and I don't even see this. Well, really, the in a very early stage, something seriously high-end technology being deployed as something totally critical for an online operation. I still think we're struggling, and I mean this in all e-commerce I know, and we benchmark. We're still struggling with some of the essentials, like what do you do for an effective product discovery? You have to have the right tools. You have to have something personalized. You have to speak to each and every consumer in a different way. So technology, in that sense, is just a very powerful search and recommendation-based engine or whatever. When you have a store that has millions of products, I mean, we've just reached that plateau, and I can tell you, we really are more and more focused on trying to aid our customers to get to what they want really fast, and sometimes the store is just a really great complement to that. So to that online experience of being overwhelmed with millions of stuff. I mean, I dare you to go and buy, I don't know, shoes online at Amazon. It's just crazy because not everyone has the right filters, so you can filter exactly the same thing. So and it's a benchmark. It's probably the benchmark, but not in terms of experience. So I mean, we're all just really focusing on getting the basics as well as we can. And then all the virtual reality and augmented reality it's just kind of the cherry on the cake, but it's not the cake itself.
Yeah. Also, I would never buy shoes. I feel like whenever I do look for shoes online, I end up just having 12 in my cart and going, I can't afford this. I'm just going to exit. So it's a bit terrifying. Thank you. I really appreciate your answers. For everybody listening, sorry, this is going to go longer, but I really enjoy chatting with everybody. If anybody has to go, please feel free. We actually had a question from the audience, and it's for our esteemed speakers over here. But briefly, I'll just say, Ruth asked the question. You said at the beginning that better enforcement is needed before new rules are made. How do you see this could be achieved? Member state initiatives, industry codes of conduct, etc. I don't know if either of you wants to take that one.
Should we start?
Go for it.
Well, we see that the level of enforcement across Europe is not always, across the European Union is not always the same. So you have countries that have more resources and they can enforce regulations in an easier way compared to other countries. So what we think is that maybe the European Commission should step in this sense and, I don't know, maybe provide more resources to ensure that member states have the resources they need to enforce regulations that are made, because as I said, maybe the problem that we have, I don't know, I'm just mentioning data protection. It's not because we lack regulation on data protection, but maybe because you cannot enforce that regulation in that specific country because that specific country doesn't have the resources to do so.
Right.
In terms of human resources, financial resources, capacity, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, I don't want to add any specific point to what you just mentioned, to what you just said. I fully agree with you. As I said earlier, I mean, it's all, let's say, part of the same thing, of the same problem which we have in Europe nowadays, which is the fragmentation of the single market. And this extremely fragmented, these differences in regulations across member states are part of a problem. And when it comes to implementing a directive or whatever the Commission produces in terms of legislation, then it always becomes a problem because you have different implementation in member states, but you have different legislation, you have different resource availability at national level, which makes the implementation rather hard, rather difficult, and that's a major problem. So we also believe that the Commission should step in and undertake, say, the major initiative. But then it comes to, let's say, it's a matter of trying to harmonize as much as possible legislation and procedures across member states. But this is a long process, and but it's essential.
Maybe something else to be added. Even you mentioned full harmonization or harmonization in general. We always try to fight for full harmonization because we think that if the rules are the same across Europe, then it's easier to go cross-border, especially if you're an SME. You already have the language barrier. At least you could rely on the same law.
Yeah.
At least. Even in cases of full harmonization, take for example the General Data Protection Regulation, some room is left to the member states, and even if that's not the case, even if you have fully harmonized provisions, the interpretation across Europe is different because you have different data protection authorities. Sometimes even in the same member state, like Germany, they try to interpret the law differently in the same country, so it's even worse.
Yeah.
So even if you have a fully harmonized regulation, you really have to monitor as Commission.
Right.
The interpretation is the same.
Yeah, you really have to work at that. Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that's a really good point. The fragmentation, as you said, is a really very good point. So we actually then have a question for our esteemed retailers. Let me unmute you guys. Okay, so we have a question from Jean-Francois. Hopefully I said that correctly. For you, what is the impact of language diversity on the complexity to step up cross-border for e-retailer? So yeah, impact of language diversity for the complexity part of it. I think this might have to do a bit with the digital strategy of expanding cross-border as well. How do you incorporate the impact of language issues, or if you are going into a country like, let's say, Switzerland, which has multiple different languages that are, Belgium as well, it's a perfect example. How do you then expand? What is your strategy for expanding into a country like that? And maybe we'll start with Wouter, and then Joanna, you can also input. Maybe you heard me. Hold on.
Yeah, what is the exact question?
So the question, hopefully I'm translating it correctly, is within your own digital strategy for going cross-border, for expanding into a country, what's the impact of language diversity? So for example, if you're going to expand into Belgium or Switzerland, where there are multiple different languages there, or say that you're expanding into a country that is, let's say Turkey, which has a language that's very different from most European languages, what's the impact of that, and how do you sort of overcome that barrier in your digital strategy for expanding cross-border into that country?
Yeah, if I look from our perspective, I think the impact can be quite big if it's not in your DNA to do this, because it basically means all your IT systems somehow need to be able to support this. Like you have currencies, you have different VHT tariffs, you have different languages, you have different languages which are the same amongst countries. So you need some smart solutions there to make this scalable. Otherwise, you're being busy only managing certain detailed parts of a country. So I think it can be quite a challenge if you didn't start with this philosophy from day one. We know many examples from Dutch retailers who are going abroad and who have large platforms already, and now they need to rebuild the whole stuff because they are going to internationalize. But if it's in your DNA and you do this from day one, then it's just, yeah, it's part of business. It's one of the things you will need to cover to be a European player. And of course, it's also an advantage because I think it's because of this diversity in languages and everything that US companies are still quite reluctant to enter the European market. So if we manage this well, it also gives us kind of a sort of competitive advantage against companies from Asia and the US.
Yeah, Joanna?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely it's not only language, as Wouter said. It's also very specific features of the different markets. I mean, it really, we have that experience only with Spain, and it's well, it's close language, but it's still completely different. So we wouldn't be able to operate in Portuguese in Spain, neither would a Spanish marketplace be able to operate fully in Portugal with Catalan, with Spanish or Castellano or whatever. But well, Spain has that problem in itself, so we also have that problem in Spain. So not a problem; it's really a cultural feature. But in terms of costs, of course, it takes a toll on your systems, because you have to have prepared systems or be prepared to evolve them for sure. It takes a toll on your catalog setup, and I mean, we work with highly technological products which have to be translated and specifically translated to all the markets we're operating in. And it's not easy, because you cannot have features in English or whatever. It's just not acceptable to our customers. So we have to have both in Portuguese and in Spanish and in English for international buyers. So it's really well, it's very, very demanding. And of course, the customer support as well. You do not only have to have the language, but also have to understand the specificities of a specific market. So it's an issue in terms of costs for sure, but also cultural. You really have to be culturally open to differences and try to understand what moves or what upsets a specific nationality, sometimes not even nationality, a region. We also have that. So it's very demanding.
Yeah,
that's
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep everybody too long, so I'm just going to say, one more thing from each of you, and maybe just a brief sentence or two. What would your main advice be to an SME who wants to sell across the border into another country? What would be, if you could go back in time and say, gosh, I wish somebody had told me that, what would it be? What's the one thing that you would say? And let's actually start back with Joanna. I'll give it back to you first. What would you say is the one thing you wish somebody had told you to be successful then?
I mean, we're successful now, so hope you're not implying we're not successful, but still, and we're not an SME, so it's I think it's a completely different struggle when you have a big company or big corporation supporting you, or you're an SME. So for an SME, in terms of going online, but especially for going cross-border, as you just mentioned, I would make sure I'd enter into a marketplace first, so I can actually test my supply chain abilities and really try to navigate the marketing of that marketplace. I would choose the marketplace well, because it's really the marketplace itself. Well, it's a marketplace, so a lot of competition. So I'll probably choose something smaller first, but really to test your limits in terms of supply chain, etc. I mean, we've opened up the marketplace, and we've had some sellers newly entered into the online business, and they're really overwhelmed with just the quantity of orders they get, because they weren't used to such a powerful marketing machine working. So all of a sudden they're really flooded with orders. They're not prepared. They're not. It's really discouraging, because you get bad results, etc. So I'd really advise, if you do not have a huge marketing budget or really powerful systems all the way, I would really advise to make a small test, really quick test, agile test online in the marketplace, and then just go from there. That's what I'll probably do.
Cool, thank you. Walter, what would you say?
I would say just don't let yourself being stopped by anything that looks complex. Just try to be active all over Europe somehow as an online retailer. I think for the future of of your company, it's also a wise thing to do, because we will need scale somehow. So my first advice is just go do it and try it. And the second one is, what we see is that the countries that are the most complex somehow are also really interesting in terms of marketing spend that you have, in terms of what people are willing to pay, in terms of currency advantages that you have. So companies or countries like Switzerland are a little bit harder, but they are really interesting to be active as an online retailer. You see it in your figures. That's something we see in our daily business. So I would say just try to have a global or a European perspective, and maybe even start with the most difficult countries first, and then bigger countries where everybody's already active.
Great, good advice. And you guys, do you have some advice?
Yeah, from the association's perspective, of course.
Okay.
And commenting on complexity, which is indeed a big issue, I would suggest you reach out to national e-commerce associations, because specifically some of our associations, they even have specific SME programs supposed to help them. First at national level, potentially also cross-border. So my suggestion is really reach out to them, because they can help you. So yeah. And reach out to Ecommerce Europe if you don't know who to reach out,
Yeah.
and then we can redirect you to another national association eventually.
Definitely.
For us, basically, what we see as priorities for SMEs to enhance their competitiveness and to grow in size and become bigger companies, become more competitive. For us, there are two things. One has already been recalled by one of the speakers earlier, but is really a key point, is to be able to go online, become visible online, to increase the presence online. Is really a major step towards higher competitiveness and so forth. And second thing, in addition to that, as a complement, is access to finance, to funding via venture capital, via specific funding, whatever. There are so many ways you can actually finance the whole supply chain, and particularly for the benefit of SMEs nowadays in Europe. So access to funding, access to capital is really another key issue. So I'll say these two things: going online access to finance.
Okay, so to summarize, the four main points that you guys just said: marketplaces, check them out. If you should try selling on one, test your product, test it, see how that goes. Have a European or a global perspective even. Think about it and look for the most difficult countries to sell into and give it a go. See what happens, because they can also be the most lucrative, I might say. Contact your national associations or e-commerce Europe and look for funding. Look to see if you can find that funding and how that works, and try to remain as competitive as possible. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up because it's already been forever, but we started a bit late, so forgiveness is I think it's fair. I'm gonna say a huge thank you to Joanna and Wouter for joining us. It's really great to have two awesome retailers here to talk about their experiences. I hope it's okay. If somebody in the audience has a question, you can always send it to my email address, and maybe I can forward it on to them, and maybe they have some time to answer your question, hopefully. But thank you to you both so much for coming.
Thank
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. And thank you so much to Luca and Alessandro. Thanks so much for our sponsors, actually, which namely you guys, but also SAP, Ascendia, MultiSavePay, Dotshop, Manhattan Associates. I'm shamelessly plugging our report now. Sorry, but it's pretty cool. We worked really hard on it. I'm really proud of it. It's my baby for this year. And e-commerce Europe and Eurocommerce were utterly the most important people in creating it. So if you would like to check it out, you should definitely download it in our wiki or buy it even, or I think if you're a member, you can get a code. Yeah, so definitely do that. And thanks so much. I'm awful at ending these things. Thank you. Let's see if I can click the exit.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Join us
everybody.
next time.
Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.